My name is Ara, and I'm the host of the Tamil Creator Podcast. I chat with creators from all over the world to share their stories and discuss hot topics in a way that I hope inspires, educates, and entertains you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Tamil Creator. I'm your host, Ara. Today I have Sujani Siva, and she's worked 12 years in public health across various sectors, including not-for-profit, academia, and government. And about 7.5 years ago, while concurrently managing her full-time role for the government of Canada, she decided to build and launch PH Spot to support the workforce in public health. And PH Health basically helps people in, employees in the public health sector build out their, dream careers while not only making an impact, but also finding fulfillment in their careers. So, Sujani, welcome to the podcast and thanks for jumping on.
Thank you so much, Ara. It's truly amazing that you've curated this amazing podcast of Tamil creators. And, I've been inspired myself by a lot of the guests that you've brought on. So very, very honored to be here myself.
No, thank you. Yeah, I think 123 episodes in. So I think it's just like anything, the longer you do it, if you like it, naturally you get better, and hopefully I've got better since episode 1. So thank you. For me, I like to kind of start at the beginning, which is, as a parent, and I think you're a parent now as well, just kind of understanding, what were these early childhood or like formative teenage years like for you, and kind of how did that shape, I guess, who you ended up being in terms of like, working in the government full time, but also managing this great business, which I follow a lot of your posts on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
LinkedIn's a very underrated social network. People talk about Facebook and Instagram, but I think LinkedIn is like super underrated. So, anyways, continue.
Yeah, no, just a point on LinkedIn. I think I kind of rediscovered it in late 2022 just because I was kind of like assessing all the different social media platforms, and I was asking myself, okay, I'm not a photo person, I'm not a video person, but I love to write, and kind of just like started exploring LinkedIn in that angle. And it's been amazing for anyone listening that hasn't explored it. I think if you're a writer, it's a great platform to build. Going back to the beginning, I guess I don't talk much about kind of my childhood upbringing. It was a difficult one, so maybe it's a conversation for another day. But briefly, I think I'll just say, raised by a single mother. My dad passed away when we were very young, at the age of 4. I was 4. My sister was 6. My younger sister was yet to be born. So I think that probably built the person I am. And I think for like whatever it's worth, it was good, a good childhood. And I think I've built a character just based on those experiences and whatever my mom has kind of instilled in us and really taught us, I think. Yeah.
And like, at what point did you kind of decide that you wanted to kind of make a career in public health, or just kind of in the, I guess, world of government? And yeah.
Yeah, I think the sciences were pretty early on. I think I got interested, thought I would go into dentistry, so went into like a bachelor of science program at the University of Toronto, and soon realized it wasn't for me. Like I hated all of the courses. I stumbled into a public health course, discovered epidemiology, and decided maybe that's the path I should follow. Explored that a little bit more, and decided I'd jump right into a master's from there and specialize in epidemiology. So I think the discovery of public health and knowing that it existed as a career path was very much towards the end of my undergrad years. And so it's also a question I ask a lot of people on my podcast, kind of how they discovered public health as a career. And it sounds like for many people, it was an accidental discovery. And as you're probably aware, and maybe many of our listeners, it's not a field that we get told to pursue. I think a lot of people kind of initially start off with the sciences and they discover public health. And the story was the same for me. In my master's, I was taking a bunch of courses and we had a guest lecture, and she worked in outbreak kind of response work. And I kind of decided, I want to graduate and I want to work exactly in that department that she was working in. And the stars just aligned really well, I suppose. And there was a massive hiring for that specific department right at the tail end of me graduating. And so applied and got in right after I graduated from my master's.
That's awesome. I guess the question for you, like, I don't know if it's around the same time or not, but it's something I kind of became more curious about, like with people in general. But what was your first job ever? Was it kind of after you graduated, or did you do stuff kind of in between as well, like while you're
I
in
definitely,
school?
yeah, I definitely did stuff in between, but I'd say like my first big kid job was probably that government job I got right out of my master's. But leading up to it, I think when I was in high school, I worked at a uniform store for private schools. You know, people would come and buy uniform. That was kind of my first job with a paycheck. I did some tutoring here and there on the side. During my undergrad years, I worked in a law firm, at a dental office. So a bunch of little jobs here and there, all kind of casual and part-time hours as a research assistant. But that job right out of my master's was my first full-time job. And sometimes I give the advice to others that if I were to do it over again, I may have worked for a little bit, done a full-time job after my undergraduate degree, and then pursued a master's. But I think, you know, each person is different, and you get different experiences based on the different path that you take.
Yeah, I agree with that because I did my MBA after like I did engineering and it was like straight, and a lot of people in my cohort had work experience, and like for them, they're able to easily pull, oh, like
Hmm.
situations like in the workforce that was related to the courses that I had no idea or like
Yeah.
very little experience. Also, even younger than that, I think forget even masters. As you were kind of talking, and it's something I thought about is I feel like school would be more interesting or relevant because I felt like I did the minimum in school to kind of
Mm.
graduate versus because I was always exploring all these other interests and things of mine.
Yeah.
And I felt like school wasn't really conducive to it. But I feel like if school is set up in a way where you got like kind of breaks in between like years to kind of, I don't know, do like a, I don't know, 4 to 6 month kind of internship or something, and then come back to school like
Yeah.
every year. But I don't know. It's just like, it just didn't feel like it was set up the right way, but just a
Yeah.
tangent. Um, in terms of, I know that you kind of been working with the government of Canada for about 11 years now, and whenever I see somebody that's been working at one place for more than like 4 years in this day and age, it's like it's pretty rare. I would say like it's not very common. So for me, the first thing is always, hey, like what made you kind of stay with them for 11 years? Because it's
Hmm.
quite unusual in this day and age.
Yeah. Um, it's funny when I first got into the government of Canada, I would tell everybody I worked with, like, I'm only here for a year. I'm quitting and I'm gonna go off and do my own thing. And then I think it was last year I got my 10-year plaque and I was like, oh boy, this wasn't part of the plan. So it was definitely not part of the plan to kind of like stick around this long. But I think what has made it interesting is the ability to kind of move around and try different roles. So within the government of Canada, there's, you know, tons of different departments you can be part of. And once you're in, you kind of get to explore all those different departments. And I was with the Public Health Agency of Canada. And also, like, I stuck around for the past 11 years within the Public Health Agency of Canada and moved around to different branches or centers, if you will. So for the first 5 years, I did outbreak response, responding to like multi-jurisdictional outbreaks within the country, and that was super interesting. And I think by year 4 or 5, I was getting to a point where I'm like, okay, I'm not feeling challenged. I'm not feeling like I can be as creative as I want to be in this space. So then that's when I kind of looked around and there was an opportunity to move out to Winnipeg to work on like the opioid crisis. Did that for a couple of years and then yet like found another opportunity. So I did stick around within the same organization, but have moved around into different roles each like every four years the first time, and then after that it's been shorter and shorter. So it's felt like I guess a new job each time.
Got it. It's almost like being in a long-term relationship. You just got to keep it fresh, I guess, to kind of
Yeah,
keep
yeah.
that excitement.
Yeah, and I guess every time I moved around, like I built on the relationships and the network that I had. So each job like felt easier because I could pull on these individuals, and public health, especially in Canada, is such a small world. So you kind of know the people and you can kind of rely on each other. So I think sticking around just makes you a lot more valuable because you do have those relationships that you've built over time. And
Got
like
it.
things in government, like I'm sure you know it takes time to see. like results. So you kind of have to stick it through to see results.
Oh, that makes sense. I think that's for anything. I think to really like some things you can kind of see the results quicker, but I think most times like there's that saying of you overestimate what you do in a year and underestimate
Hmm.
what you do in a decade. So I think that's kind of true,
Yeah.
especially for government.
Yeah.
So I guess what was the I guess aha moment for you that kind of sparked PH Spot, and like how did you come up with the name? Like how did
Yeah.
you even decide to kind of build it out as a solo founder versus maybe with like a co-founder? So
Yeah. So, going back to your comment about kind of school is set up in a way that doesn't allow you to explore different things. I think I was in that mindset during undergrad, kind of just was focused on getting the marks. In my master's, like for whatever reason, I kind of had a different like mindset. And I try to, at least towards the end, like the second year, I try to do assignments in a way that it could benefit me beyond school. So one of the assignments ended up being kind of the foundation for me to start this other not-for-profit organization I had started, Tamil Health Association. And so that was, I guess, my first step into exploring like building something from the ground up from an idea that I had already. I think up until then, I didn't really think I'd ever explore entrepreneurship or build something for myself. I ran that for, I'd say, about 7 years or so. And between kind of my undergrad and launching PH Spot, Kajant, my husband and I, we had tried different ideas. So it was always like something we love to do, like think about a problem, think about a solution. How could we build something? So I think PH Spot was around that time as well when I was meeting up with new grads, individuals who just wanted some guidance on their careers in public health. So on the weekends, I used to live out in Guelph, so I'd come down to Toronto, have coffee back to back, like every weekend with one new grad. And I think one summer I became like pretty unsustainable, and I was like, okay, I can't keep doing this. There must be like more of a scalable way to do mentorship. Around the same time, a friend of mine was interested in like coding and building websites. And so I pitched him the idea of like, hey, why don't you build this site for me? Maybe we can like pull different public health jobs. We can add a blog on there. I could share experiences of building a career in public health. And it was just supposed to be a fun little project. And, he built this. I expected him to build this black and white kind of poorly looking site, but he ended up building this beautiful platform, which kind of then ignited the idea of, okay, maybe this could be something. So initially it was, a couple of my friends, my husband and I kind of pulling this together. And then I think my friend lost interest because he wasn't in public health fair. And so I took it and I thought, okay, what could we do more with it? People wanted a newsletter. And so one thing grew to another. And kind of like the basis of it was really how could I scale that one-on-one mentorship I was doing by bringing other people's experiences on this like online platform, especially like back in the days, 7, 8 years ago, the only way for you to get kind of that professional development or mentorship was going to conferences, and these public health conferences costed like thousands of dollars. And then you also had to add in like travel fee in there. And then I'd also like go to these business events and entrepreneurship events and just be in awe of the amount of support those industries had. And when I thought about like the public health career development side of things, it was almost like non-existent. So it was almost like, okay, what could I build in this space for my peers essentially and myself to help each other out with like career development? So initially it was just a blog and a newsletter, and I would curate like community generated blog and this newsletter of jobs and something I was doing for fun kind of in the evenings and weekends. And then one day Jan was like, oh, you're really spending a lot of time. You might want to think of maybe like making this a business, maybe thinking about like revenue generation, just think about it. And I think that kind of planted the initial seed to really think about it as a business.
This episode is sponsored by nobody. That's right, nobody. So if you could be kind enough to hit that subscribe button, that would mean a lot to me.
I guess this was like really like 10 years in the making because really this is a culmination of kind of all your experiences of working in public health, but also the nonprofit you
Mm-hmm.
started. And then, yeah, so it's like, it's really like I guess 10 or if you combine all the experience, like a
Yeah.
17-year overnight success in a way.
Mhm.
Awesome. So like I guess so you talked about kind of the beginning was kind of, kind of organic in a way where you had a certain purpose for doing it. It wasn't something you wanted to build a business around. It was just something you loved doing. And your husband helped you and like a friend and some other folks. But then how has it kind of evolved in terms of structure and things like that? Because I think one of the things that like I followed your journey, and then I think you recently wrote a post which caught my attention around, I think somebody had kind of told you like starting PH Spot was a mistake. And they kind
Hmm.
of talked about processes and kind of the ability to kind of replicate yourself without actually being there with obviously processes or other things you have in place.
Yeah.
So yeah, that just like I want to kind of just riff off that,
Mhm.
just hear your thoughts there.
Yeah. So when I launched the not-for-profit organization, Tamil Health, it was incredible. Like we did some incredible work. We had some grant funding, but the problem I ran with there was funding, obviously, right? To keep people motivated enough to keep doing the work. And so when I thought about PH Spot and how I want to structure it, I knew right off the bat that I wanted to be kind of a sole founder so I could make decisions very quickly. So this comes from like, I think trying things and failing and having those as like notes in your book to be like, okay, this was a good lesson. I'm going to use this later on. So those were things I was sure of. Like I'm going to be a sole founder so I could make decisions quickly. I was going to make it a business so that I could kind of like be creative in the way that we're generating revenue. And if I were to bring anybody on board, it would definitely be for paid positions. I would no longer do volunteer positions or internships because I saw how difficult that was in the not for profit organization. So these were kind of like fundamentals in the way I wanted to start PH Spot. So I launched in 2017. So 2017, 2018, and I think up until then there was no revenue generated because I was still figuring out what to do, and then decided to like launch a course which kind of gave me confidence that I could generate some revenue through PH Spot. And then so in 2019 was when I made my first hire to kind of take over the the things that I was working on a daily basis, right? So the way I've been hiring since 2019 is kind of like assessing what is it that I'm doing repetitively day in and day out that I could just hand over to someone, which then frees up my time and mental space to think about growth for a PH Spot. Um, and so up until then, I was doing everything myself, like every single evening, hour, and weekend I had, it was kind of spent on PH Spot. So when I had my first hire, that forced me to put in those systems and processes. And if I think back to kind of if I was still in that role where one of my directors had told me if I wanted to continue and have a career in the government, I should probably shut down PH Spot. So I'm glad I didn't because I knew that like the way he had built his career was this like the way that I think traditionally people have built it, they stay in one job, one organization for several years, kind of like focus on that. And for me, part of the other reason I started PH Spot is I felt like the creativity that I was craving, I wasn't able to get at work. And so when I had my 9 to 5 job plus PH Spot, I felt like completely fulfilled and there was that itch I was able to scratch. Um, so with that first hire, there was like a system that was put in place, right? So this person was responsible for these things, and so this is how we would make it more efficient. And so a lot of things that I've kind of offloaded to other team members has been thinking about like where can I get more time back for myself so that I can also build this career in public health, be there for my family, and also continue like building this brand and community.
That's amazing because I think a lot of entrepreneurs or business owners um, often basically give themselves a worse job than they had before by
Yeah.
owning a business because they have no processes or delegation in place.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that you kind of recognize that early on and just kind of where I guess because it is a leap of faith to kind of trust that somebody will
Mm-hmm.
work on the things that you worked on with the same energy, passion, and drive. Because the founder, you have that's kind of built into you, but it's really hard to transfer that. So
Yeah.
that's really remarkable that you do that. So I guess before you were kind of working on this all the time, now like, how many hours a week are you able to like are you putting in that you have all these things in place?
Yeah. I'd say like me sitting down in front of a computer at a desk is probably like barely an hour a week. So I'm usually like on my phone responding to my team for questions that they may have. So I've got it down to, 1 or 2 hours a week here and there. Um, but then if we have like launches or some project that we're working on, then I'll put in a few more hours. But I'd say that I could be away from PageSpot for several weeks and it would be fine. And that was intentionally done. So when I was expecting my son, he was born in June 2021. So towards the end of 2020, I told myself when my son is born, I want to make sure that PageSpot keeps running and I don't touch it for 6 months. And so the processes and the systems I had put in place were such that I would not have to touch anything and it would still continue to run, and it did. And so I've kind of like built on that. And I think the first hire was the most scariest, but after that, it's been incredible. And I think the piece that has worked really well for me is that I hire within the community. So the individuals that follow PHSpot, I would put out the job postings directly to them. So I know they know the brand, they've been around, they've kind of seen what we've built. And then it's easy for us to kind of communicate what we're looking for to those individuals versus a random person.
That's amazing. I guess you've done the entrepreneur's dream, which is a lot of entrepreneurs, like I kind of touched on earlier, but being able to fire yourself from most jobs, like that's the goal,
Yeah.
right? Like to
Yeah.
make yourself essentially mostly useless at your company, which means you've done your job at building a great
Yeah.
machine.
Exactly.
Um, awesome. And then also like you built this community and like I think these were one of the questions I wanted to ask because I know building a community is very difficult. I think
Mm-hmm.
analogy I heard that was really good was it's like almost like building a fire. It's really hard to kind of light that spark and kind of sustain it, but once it gets
Yeah.
going, it's if you built a great community, it's on fire all the time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like what was your secret or like what are you comfortable sharing about like how you built that community and sustaining it?
Yeah, I think it's like when I reflect back on it, like nothing, I don't know if anything was done intentionally to keep the spark alive. I think I truly just wanted to treat every individual that came across PHBot the way I'd be treated if I kind of like came across some sort of community or resource. And I think for the first several years, I would, if anybody subscribed to the email kind of list, I would write like automated, this like email would go out to them. And then at the end, I would encourage them to write back and tell me about themselves. And so for the first several years, I wrote back to every single person that wrote to me. And so these were like hundreds and hundreds of emails. So I think that kind of established some really good foundations. And a lot of, individuals part of the community are from back in like 2017. A lot of endorsement from universities, professors, I think has also helped. I've experimented with like ads here and there, but nothing has really like turned into followers. So I kind of brag and say every single person has been like organically kind of brought to me to PH Spot or like word of mouth. I think when I really like saw the power of that was when I'd meet random people and they tell me like their professor talked about it in their class and they encouraged us to go and sign up. So I think just hearing all of that positive feedback really like kept me motivated. And when people wrote back to me, it also kept me motivated because, in the early days, it was hard to um, keep myself going. And even like nowadays, sometimes I feel really burnt out and tired and I'd be like, oh, is this worth it? And then I'd have to like remind myself of all the people that are continuing to tell me like how valuable it's been for them in their careers. So I think like building a career is a lonely process for a lot of people. So introducing community and I think I've done it in a way that has a lot of like compassion for each individual. And I think that's probably what's kind of kept the fire going.
Yeah, and I mean getting all your members via referral or like word of mouth is great for your customer acquisition costs as well
Yeah.
because not spending money on that. So that's great. You talked about like the loneliness of kind of building out your career, but what about as an entrepreneur, especially as a solo founder?
Yeah.
Have you ever found it kind of challenging at points to kind of continue on, or I guess the processes you've kind of built in place have allowed you to not get that normal kind of let down, or like the heaviness of kind of being a solo founder?
Yeah. It was tough. It still is, but I think I'm fortunate that Kajant, my husband, is also an entrepreneur, so we get to kind of lean on each other. More recently, I have joined online communities for like women entrepreneurs or different groups that I feel connected with, and have made friends online, tons of online friends. So that's really helped. But I think like podcasts, reading books, watching YouTube videos, those have been my like companions whenever I feel a bit lonely or kind of don't know which way to go. I've really leaned on those quite a bit.
I have a friend that has a not a bit like it's not in the same industry, but he's built a community around a certain niche of people. And one observation I had is like, have you noticed, especially with your life stage as well, have you noticed socially that you're kind of less social, or like in the sense because you have family obligations, you have this business, which obviously it seems like you've done a great job setting your processes, but beyond that, like, do you feel like you have any more to give to anybody else? Or I'm just curious, as a fellow like entrepreneur, your
Yeah,
thoughts
yeah.
about it.
That's a good question. I think in the past, maybe that may have been true, but I think very recently, Kajant and I have kind of intentionally told ourselves like we can't be in this mindset of like we're gonna build, build, build now to live later kind of mindset, and really like think about, are we living today kind of to the best we can? And it was a recent mind shift, and I think especially having a child as well, you want to be present kind of here today. And a lot of the hiring I did was to make sure we did that. So I think up until last year I had so many evening calls, so I finished my 9 to 5 job, spend a couple hours with my son, and then jump on like PH spot meetings and do all these things. Um, and then I had to kind of identify that as yet another place I need to hire. And so I kind of got somebody to just take over all the programming, and that's what kind of truly opened up more time and space and energy for me. So yes, I'd say like maybe a year ago I did feel exhausted and burnt out, but more recently I've been able to kind of give that over to somebody else to be like, okay, and like also make rules like no more working on the weekends so that we do have that for ourselves, our family, our friends. Um, so I think like we had to pull ourselves out of that.
And is PH Spot bootstrapped, or like do you have plans to fundraise, or like have you thought about that? Like, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Definitely will continue bootstrapping. I don't love the fundraising and kind of I guess having to respond to investors kind of model. I think what I would ideally like it to be is probably, right now we have, I'd say about 200 members like in our membership model. So in terms of like the business model for PH Spot, it's taken different like evolutions, and we've finally found that the membership model works really well. My goal is to make it like the number one online space for public health career development. So right now we're at about like 200 members from around the world. I think it could easily get to like 10,000. So the goal is to get it to that number. The costs are so little with, I think, like an online business that there really is no need for funding. If there's like anything I am really kind of working on is like partnerships with institutions, like academic institutions, to see like how could we offboard their students or alumni into something like this, because they need that support or fellowships. So I'm in chats with those kind of organizations. So in terms of growth, it's more like partnerships growth versus like going out and fundraising, because the cost, like I'm able to sustain it the way it is with kind of what it's generating now.
Did you know that every time you left a 5 out of 5 review for this podcast, a Tamil parent lets their child pursue a career in the creative arts? Okay, that's probably not true, but if there's a chance that it is, do you really want to jinx it? Leave a review. Do it for the young creative in you.
That's amazing. A question I have to ask is it's the buzzword of the year, AI. Like, have you thought about like how AI is going to fit in? Because I mean, part of the community is like around content generation. So
Mhm.
it doesn't have to be that, but like, do you use AI for any parts of your business? Like, have you found it useful, or have you thought about how to incorporate it, if at all, if it's useful?
I tried, like, when I was writing my LinkedIn posts, I thought, okay, maybe I'll get it to give me some like outlines and help me with just setting up the way I want to write it. But I didn't love it for like writing because I then like had to tell myself I love writing. That's why I'm here on LinkedIn. So it didn't really work there. I'd have to ask my team if they use it. I'm sure they kind of like use it to help themselves with like outlines and things like that. Um, so nothing I can think of, but I have thought of like, are there ways we can like build small tools within our community to like support individuals on their goals related to career development? So that's something I brainstorm with Kajad. Like he has a product studio, so I was like, okay, like what can we build here that could benefit my community? So we're always thinking, but I don't think I've kind of landed on anything.
Almost like almost like an AI career counselor in a way, where like
Yeah,
kind of
something like that, right? Like
Mhm.
career counseling or networking. I think those are kind of the two big pieces that like job application, growing your network, and like figuring out what your career path is going to be are kind of like the three pillars that we focus on in the community. So surely there has to be something that we could brainstorm to just even like try out and test out.
Got it. And even though like I'm an entrepreneur, I recognize what you built is very hard. Um, do you ever, it's like when you don't speak the same language, when I say from a business point of view or like career point of view, do you ever find people kind of like doubting or like wondering, like not taking seriously what you've built? Like even though like you built this amazing community, like as someone, I'm not in public health, but just building communities, I think difficult and kind of sustaining it, but like all the things you built out are very impressive.
Yeah.
For someone that doesn't understand like that lingo or like in that world, so if you want to call them normal folks, how like do you ever kind of feel this like sense that they don't take what you do seriously? I don't know if I'm asking the question
Yeah, yeah,
correctly,
yeah.
but I want to kind of
I think I did in the past. And then after a point, I just didn't care.
okay,
Because I think I would go to like just events, right? Like entrepreneurship events, and I'd struggle to explain my business because, people were there from all these like massive tech companies or they were trying to build the next unicorn and they were looking for like venture funding and like I couldn't fit myself into any of those categories until I think I started discovering people like I know maybe you follow them like Justin Welsh or Jay Clouse, Ali Abdal, like those are the creator economy folks, and I think I started connecting with them a lot more. So I like nowadays when I go to like events related to like entrepreneurship, I'll just say like, oh, I have a platform for career development, and if they're curious, they will ask more. If not, then I don't bother. I think back in the days, I tried to fit myself into one of those categories, and I struggled quite a bit, and I did get frustrated. And then to like, I think my mom and my family, it's a very vague like, oh, I help people figure out their careers. The actual business model, I don't think they understand. Like sometimes I'll do workshops or training sessions for different universities, and I think that part conceptually they can understand. So I think like in the category of teaching and coaching, they typically understand. But I think I am not bothered by it nowadays.
yeah, all those folks that you kind of mentioned, I do follow their newsletters or like something like on a regular basis. Also, I think it's like I feel like entrepreneurship has gone through this corporatization, if it makes sense, where like I think like 10 years ago when I was kind of getting into it, it felt like more like, hey, we're like the outsiders, and then all of a sudden it's like become very mainstream. And I feel like everyone's chasing it, but not really wanting to do the work or like everyone's like, hey, I want to build a unicorn or like raise money versus I'm very much like you where like I follow a lot of like podcasts that are really centered around bootstrapping or like building quote unquote lifestyle businesses, which I think people
Yeah.
use as an insult, but really I'm like, who would want to build a business that can sustain their life and like they enjoy doing and
Yeah.
you know, so it's just like my little rant about that is like I feel like whenever you tell somebody you're chasing like a bootstrapped or like lifestyle business, it's like it's looked down upon, but
Mhm.
I think it's amazing. Like for the reasons you mentioned, like you can make your own decisions. You don't answer to anybody else. You're not,
Yeah.
I feel like fundraising, maybe this is like, I feel like it's a giant Ponzi scheme at times. Like it's definitely necessary for certain types of companies, but I feel like the incentives are very wrong.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of great companies get fizzled out because they're chasing the next raise versus building a company that's sustainable economically. So,
Yeah. Yeah. No,
uh,
completely agree.
yeah. I guess for you, like, where do you see yourself? You kind of hinted at like professionally with your business,
Hmm.
hitting that 10,000 member mark. But I guess just overall, like with your business and personally, like, where do you want to be in the next like 5 years? Like, what's your
Hmm.
ideal dream outcome?
Yeah. Like I mentioned, I wasn't supposed to be around with the government for 10 years. And so initially the plan was, I'd stick around for a couple of years and go off and build my own thing. And I think that's still the goal and the dream. And then, as you kind of build a family, you're trying to make more like decisions based on, what's important for the family, which is like stability and like stable income and things like that. So I think the next 5 years, though, I could see myself go full time into PH Spot. And like you said, keep it as a lifestyle business, generating a decent income and not working more than a couple hours a week, spending time with family and really, and like going back to your point, like, do I feel like I don't have enough to give for the rest of my life, like rest of the parts of my life? And I think the goal is that we like Gurjant, myself, my son, and rest of our family, like we could spend more time together and enjoy life, and not be part of this like rat race of trying to build something for this like future retirement. I think you're somebody who like follows the is it the Fire Nation model
Yeah.
where you kind of like live for now. Yeah. So I think that's the goal, and I think we're getting very close to that. Like, yes, I'm tied down to a 9 to 5 job, but I think it's necessary right now, and I've told myself it's not for long term at least. And then there's like lots of options with the government to like go down part time, which will then give me more time for a PH spot. But right now, my husband went full time, so it's his few years to get that up and running.
Yeah, I think people just underestimate how many options there out there for like their career and their like life. I think
Mm-hmm.
fire, like people like always like fire is obviously like related to finances, but really the fundamental idea is, yeah, like don't prolongate like the life you want to live it for like 20, 30 years down the
Mm-hmm.
line. Just start living it now and eventually over time you'll get there. I think
Yeah.
your idea of what you want might also change, right? Like when I was young, I was like, oh, I want to be this career, and then I tried it. I was like, oh, this is definitely not something I want to do. So it's the same thing with like what you think retirement or like whatever that is looks like for you.
Mm-hmm.
You might actually hate it. So like why not try like whenever I do stuff, I try to do like mini versions of that. So
Yeah.
um, like instead of taking like a whole week off, take off like half a day in the week, do nothing
Mm-hmm.
and see how you like it. Some people don't like
Yeah.
it. But yeah, no, I'm definitely a big fan of the fire movement just because I think money is a good tool to look at how you control your time because I want to do what I want when I want.
Yeah.
And if you like, there's people that make $500,000 that I know of that are living quote unquote paycheck to paycheck, and there's people that
Mm-hmm.
make a tenth of that that are like living their life the way they want to live. So
Yeah.
it's just like living below your means and living smartly so you can kind of make the right choices for yourself and your family.
Yeah.
Especially when I got kids and like you have a child as well, I think my mortality became more evident because I didn't really think about that. And I was like, wait, I kind of want to be around for
Yeah.
all these things. I don't want to be stressed or I want to have good health. So yeah.
Yeah. I think when we can kind of like put pen to paper, right? I think there was this really neat activity we had done where, sometimes we think we need a ton of money to live our best life, whatever that looks like. And if you just kind of write out what that looks like, right? Okay, I want to own a house that costs this much. I want send my kids to daycare. I want to eat out every week. And you write down all of those numbers and you look at the numbers, it's not something ridiculous like $500 million or something, right? Like it is possible. And I think like once we were able to put that number down, you kind of take off the stress of needing to like work so much and really like focus on the things that matter. And to your first questions about childhood, like I lost my dad when I was 4, and when I think back to the age he was essentially the age I am now, like early 30s. I'm mid 30s now, but he was in his early 30s, and like, yeah, he my mom would say like he was saving all his like good clothes and all of this money for like a retirement that wasn't really, meant for him. So I think she's also instilled in us to kind of, really live now, because you don't know if how things are going to play out in the future. So I think a lot of that is also in the back of my head.
Yeah, it's a tricky balance because yeah, you don't want to like go you full out YOLO and like
Yeah.
not have a future, but like yeah, it's like that tricky balance of living for the present, but while that
Yeah.
future. But like the key thing you kind of brought up there is like numbers don't lie. I think people like I don't whenever I have conversations, I feel like money is like this thing not talked about, but like I love talking about it because I'm like just figure out what you want, put down the number, and then like you can like really have something to aim for, like whether you need to cut down expenses or make more money.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I just like I follow like Ramit Sethi. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Mm.
Yeah, so it's like I like how his approach of just simplifying finance and just kind of just breaking that down as well. So
Yeah. Yeah.
um I guess for you, because you seem like a lifelong learner, like what are your ways? I guess you kind of talked about it a little bit with podcasts and things like that, but is there something you do in a regular cadence to kind of improve your skills and knowledge and kind of building a business, improving your knowledge on public health?
Yeah, definitely like a self-help kind of professional development, personal development junkie in terms of like the books, the podcasts, the audiobooks. So I'm always listening to something all the time. Meditation is also something that I really, really enjoy. Kind of like fell out of it different periods of my like past couple years, but getting back into it, and I think that really helps reduce like anxiety and keeps me focused. Reduces the burnout. So I'd say like meditation is at the top there. Trying to like move my body is also another thing. And but with her in terms of like learning, podcasts and audiobooks are probably at the top. And like I like actively search for movies that I could learn, like some sort of like entrepreneurial skill. So that's also like I love multimedia and love to learn through that. So those would be my top things, like books, podcasts, audiobooks, movies.
And what's been like a failure or like better worded like learning lesson you've kind of experienced in the last 35 years, and like what was your learning from that experience?
Mm. When I was thinking about this question, I felt like I had a good answer. Now I'm blanking out. um, Probably I'd say like trying things fast, um, and not sitting. Like I can be someone that kind of like sits and plans. Even though I'm like an excellent executor, sometimes I just sit around and think, okay, I need to have the right days off. I need to have the right kind of temperature in my house. I need to have like the best meal before I can start on this work. Sometimes it can get out of hand, and I think the times I've able to like just experiment and try out different ideas quickly, I've been able to um, kind of see results much more quickly. And sometimes I've done it well, sometimes I haven't. Right now, I've been like procrastinating on redesigning the way our membership community is. And I have like pages and pages and pages of notes, but have not taken any action in terms of actually like implementing it. And I think that's always, I think, been something like of a lesson that I keep learning the hard way each time I have to make a change. And I think sometimes it's out of fear, sometimes it's out of like not being sure if it's gonna go the right way or not. Um, and so that's what probably comes to mind for me, is like not taking action quickly enough and sitting too long and thinking about it.
That's a good, I mean, I think that a lot of people have that issue.
Yeah.
I think I do that a lot with like things I don't want to do. If there's a task that I just don't want to get to, I'm like, I need to have tea, I need to eat dessert. I have to do like five things before I get to it, and then I'll
Yeah.
finally get to it.
I
Uh,
think that's been like something recent. I was talking to Kajant about it too recently. I said, like, you remember when we were like in our 20s and like we had an idea and we just like jumped on it. Like we'd have an idea and like that evening it would be like live on the website. And I feel like, I don't know, as the years have gone by, it's becoming harder for me to act that quickly. And like I haven't diagnosed as to why that is, but I'm identifying that in myself more recently.
Money can be hard to come by, but here is a $100 opportunity for you. Join my free newsletter for free exclusive content and a free chance to win $100 when I hold special draws. Did I mention that it's free?
I definitely feel like I have a sense of urgency, but I think for me personally, at least, one of the things like that I used to move fast, and sometimes I would say or do things without really thinking too much about it.
Mm-hmm.
I have the opposite learning for me, which is sometimes I have a habit of like trying to get to inbox zero or like get back to
Mm.
every message. But I realized in my haste that I would always not think things through and I would send a message that I shouldn't have sent or like something that just causes more trouble. So I feel like yeah, it's like that fine balance of like moving fast, but also thinking things through so that you could prevent like 10 times the effort like later on. Like you might sometimes have said the wrong thing to friends or family because I'm rushing to like responding to a message or same thing for work and then I get in trouble doing something else. So yeah, I can definitely resonate. My thing right now is I always have to drink tea before I do something like any kind of major task,
Yeah.
like something that's like not, oh, it's not like a 5 minute thing. Like if I need to like do it, like tea is the thing that just triggers my mind to,
Yeah.
all right, we're ready to kind of we're in work mode kind of thing.
Yeah. I think
Uh,
I recently read about that, like kind of a way to get over procrastination is to have that ritual set up for yourself so
yeah,
that your brain kind of sends these signals like, okay, serious work time, like sit down, get that focus in.
yes. I think environment has to like I have like an ad hoc office now, but I think my dream would be like living in a place where it's like me and my wife have like an awesome setup, like office setup where we get in, we just feel like amazing. I kind of have
Yeah.
that now, but it's like not, it's like really small. But anyways, yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess like if you're reflecting, Sujani, as well. So if you had a chance to go back in a time machine and visit 16-year-old like yourself,
Mhm.
what would you tell her?
Yeah. Oh my God. I would like I tell this to everybody, like start something. I think like one of the I don't have I'd say like I have zero regrets, but one of the regrets I do have is not like jumping into entrepreneurship and trying something and building something like much, much earlier. I think only started exploring it at the end of my master's. But gosh, I wish like we had tried it much, much earlier because I think you're just like so full of energy, very little risk, right? Like you're living with your parents, you have so much time and energy. And so that's something like we keep telling our younger cousins or like anybody we meet that's like much younger than us. We're just like, try something. Like, yes, school is important, getting your full time job is important, but try something else on the side. Because like you're gonna learn so much. It's not gonna work out well. You're gonna fail. It's gonna crumble. You're gonna like have sleepless nights, but it's going to like shape your career and your life in a way that you will be grateful for.
Let's see, I think you have the mindset that maybe your mom or like others in your generation, like so your mother's generation might have not had or understand, right? Versus
Yeah.
like your son, like if he decides to do this, you'd be like, oh yeah, for sure. Like you like there's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
I feel like it's because you speak that language now and you have that like for like my kids if they want to do it, I'm like, hey,
Yeah.
if you don't even want to go to university, that's cool. Like as long as you have a plan, like I think that would be unheard of with like my parents if like
Yeah.
they would never give me that option, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
so it's something quite
Yeah. One of my younger cousins like getting ready for like grad school and then we keep like challenging him. It's like, what is it that you want to do? Right. And he's like, yeah, like I really don't want to do this. I want to do something else. And we're like, okay, like you got to put down a plan. And I'm sure if you can show your plan to your parents, they're not going to say no. Like what they will say no to is you say, I don't like this, but I don't know what I want to do. And just kind of sit around at home and watch YouTube videos all day. Um, so like you got to put down a plan and you got to like try something else. But I don't think like people need to try it while quitting school. I think it can be done in parallel. I think just like using all that extra time that we have as 16-year-olds and 20-year-olds to just really explore different ideas. And I think it really grows you as a person.
for sure. And your point on I think conviction, I think universally, like even with our like parents where like they had like an old school kind of mentality, I think any kind of conviction could convince them. Like if you're unsure and like you don't know what your plan is, of course they're gonna be like,
Mm-hmm.
just keep doing school until you figure it out. But if you have conviction of like, hey, I don't want to do grad school, I don't want to do this, I want to do this, here's my plan. That's better than a lot of people, right? I think a lot of
Yeah.
people kind of prolong doing the work. So anyways, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, Now I guess forward looking in terms of your personal legacy, like in a few sentences, like how do you want to be remembered by your friends and family?
Yeah. I think probably like as somebody that help to like inspire individuals to kind of really live out their full potential is something that I always want people to think of me as. Um, and I think like even more recently, I want them to remember, like if I think about PH Spot, it's about building community, like embracing that openness to bring people together. And I wrote about this probably a couple of years ago, how I think part of that comes from like how my mom thought about community and the people around her. And I kind of like wrote about how like she would have people unannounced show up to her door from like just get off the airplane and like show up and be like, oh, we're staying over today. Or she'd have tons of people on her porch evenings taking a stroll and have tea on the porch. And that's kind of, I think, what's been the foundation for PH Spawn of the community I've tried to build virtually is like really have that peer-to-peer relationship embedded so that they don't need me or they don't need some other coach in there supporting them on their career, and that they could really rely on each other. And that's kind of like that sense of community I've built on PH Spot. And I think that's what I like for people to kind of remember me as is like I was able to bring people together when they probably would not have ever met, and that's kind of the hope with this.
Awesome. Well, that's a good segue into kind of the final part of the podcast. It's a fun speed round or game I like to call Creator Confessions. It's basically a speed round where I say a bunch of statements and you tell me the first thing that pops to mind.
Okay.
Favorite Tamil food?
Ooh, katekagari.
If there's like a fire, flood, or like you only have time to take two things with you, not people or like pets or anything like that, what are they?
That's a tough one. I'd probably take a notebook and a pen.
Something that scares you,
Hmm. I don't know, nothing at the moment.
insecurity that you have,
That people may not want to hang out with me.
favorite TV show you're watching,
Loot,
a place you're itching to travel to,
Iceland.
fellow Tamil creator you want to give a shout out to.
Fellow Tamil creator. Hmm. Oh gosh. I feel like I don't follow too many Tamil creators.
And when I say creator, not like a content creator, like any kind of like when I say creator, like someone like yourself or like others doing the work you're doing, anything like that.
Hmm. I'm really liking like a lot of my friends who are dabbling into entrepreneurship. So um, there's Lux Enterprise who's doing rental, and uh, Nit who's also doing decor work.
Okay. Favorite child favorite childhood memory.
Hmm. Probably playing at the park um, in Montreal, which is where kind of we lived last with my dad.
Something you like to do for fun outside of work.
Read, write.
Favorite movie of all time. It could be English, Tamil, or both if you have two.
Hmm. Kanatha Mutta probably one of my favorite
Yes,
ones.
one of
Yeah.
my favorite Tamil movies. I've cried every time. Um, Something that you could benefit from caring less about.
Oh gosh, all the right wing politicians and their worldviews.
A decision you've been putting off for a while.
Um, Changing up my membership model. Yeah.
What's something you've, I guess, purchased in the last couple of years that you splurged on that you have no regret about?
Mm, I'm not a big shopper, so I'm like, probably my laptop, I'd say. Yeah.
What's something that you were recently just wrong about? Like you were just wrong about it. Like you thought something, but it was totally different.
These are hard questions, Ara.
It's meant to be part therapy slash,
I
fun.
think so. Very much therapy. Something I was wrong about. Um, hmm, this is a hard one. I feel like my son's always correcting me every day, so that feels like the norm.
Well, that's okay. I mean, you can go to the next one, which is a pet peeve of yours.
Yeah. Pet peeve is probably not having things organized in their right spots. Like everything needs to be organized.
Got it. If you knew that you were going to die tomorrow, a regret that you would have.
Not a lot. I think I'm pretty content with everything.
A celebrity or just any person that whose life you'd want to experience for just one day.
Hmm. I feel like such a boring person right now. Reading or through an audiobook, Eat, Pray, Love.
Yeah.
And I think like her writing is just beautiful. And I think because I love writing, I'd love to kind of experience how she has written those books that she has written.
And what's a book you read recently or podcast you listened to that's had a big impact on you recently?
Uh, Big impact. I think Get Good with Money. I forget the author's name. That was a really good one. I'm really trying to get myself to be better with money and I going back to the basics and trying to learn
And what's a belief, behavior, or habit that's improved your life?
meditation for sure.
And finally, what's a piece of advice you'd give to your fellow aspiring Tamil creators out there?
Start now, reach out, like start creating and see where that takes you. Don't hesitate.
Awesome. Well, I mean, Sujani, that was great. That's a great way to kind of end off the podcast. Thanks for jumping on, sharing kind of your story. I mean, for me, I got to learn a lot, so it was really interesting, and I'm sure the audience will like kind of learn a lot as well. What's the best way, if someone's listening to this, they want to kind of connect with you, what's the best way for someone to reach out to you?
Yeah, definitely on LinkedIn. So Sujani Swanandaraja is how you can find me. And if you want to send me a connection request, I think if you can add a note, that'd be an easy way for me to filter through and accept.
And I'll give you 20 seconds to pitch someone listening to this on why they should, if they're in public health, why they should consider joining PH Spot.
Because you don't want to do it alone. I think career building is tough on its own. We've got an incredible community of individuals who's kind of looking to help you build their career.
Love it. Well, that's a good way to end off the podcast. Thank you again, Sujani. For those of you guys listening, as always, appreciate you guys listening, giving feedback, suggestions. On to the next episode.